Good afternoon, everyone, and a very welcome to SEPS. I know there are still people coming in, but in the interest of time, I suggest we start. So welcome everyone to SEPS for this SEPS CDP policy workshop. I'm extremely pleased to welcome you all. This is the second policy workshop of the year, and every time we manage to discuss key policy issues, and the one of tonight is certainly one of the most, the highest actually in the EU policy debate, and this is defense, EU defense, and how to finance it, which is, of course, something which is quite new. I was just speaking to some people in this audience, and we were just saying that basically until 2022, I think none of us was able to guess that this would become such a big issue. Of course, this is new for about basically 70 years. EU defense was granted by NATO with a big backing, backing from the United States. This assumption no longer holds, and this is changing completely the situation. And in particular, this shift comes at the time when actually we have war in our own neighborhood, which of course makes the situation pressing and the need to think about defense urgent. So EU security has become a political priority, and this raises a host of critical questions. It's really about how to build capabilities. It's about how to assure coordinations across member states. What is the role of the EU? And of course, how to finance it. And it is really this last aspect that we are going to discuss tonight. Even this subtopic, I have to say, it's really very big, and we can take very different angles. Tonight, the idea is really to focus on if you want more short-term issues and to see the perspective of different actors and stakeholders who could help us actually to understand few questions which I would like to mention. First is about whether member states can actually finance defense and what constraints are they facing. Evolving institutional mandates and rules. Growing expectations for industry readiness to provide defense, balancing long-term investment with short-term needs in this sense of urgency, and last but not least, also how to crowd in a private investment when we speak about defense. And as I said, for this we are going to have an excellent panel with very diverse views. But before we move to the panel, I'm very pleased to introduce Guillaume Delabrosse. He's Head of Unit Defense Policy and Innovation at DigiDefis. And I would like to ask him to set the scene and basically to illustrate what is the EU strategic approach to build EU defense. Guillaume, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good evening to all of you. Very pleased to be with you tonight. So I'd like to take a few minutes indeed to set the scene and explain the background about why we have now defense as a top priority when it comes to the European Commission and what it means and what it takes. So, you know, we have a new commission. First time ever that we have a commissioner dedicated to space and defense, at a time where actually we have big geopolitical shifts. So on one side we have threats, Russia, indeed, that is there to stay. Let's be honest. Even if we have a ceasefire in Ukraine in a couple of days or weeks to be seen, for us it's clear that Russia is a long-lasting threat that will not disappear overnight. So that's something we have to cope with structurally. Second big issue is that US is telling us very abruptly and roughly that security in Europe is our business. So they have other priorities, reshifting their priorities, their security priorities. They can't do everything, so we have to run our own security and we have to do it on our own. So if you combine that lasting threat, long-lasting threat, together with the fact that US is no longer there to provide guarantees to Europe, we need to act together, and that we need to do very quickly. So this is that sense of urgency and scale that the Commission has been promoting in the white paper on European Defence Readiness 2030. Small story is that initially we wanted to prepare a white paper on the future of European defence, like long term. But actually we decided to completely change the scope and to have as horizon 2030, because this is that horizon that we need to have in mind to be ready for what may happen for tomorrow. So you have that sense of urgency that is commonly shared across the EU 27, and the responsibility of the Commission is to create the conditions for massive investment in defense. So this is what the Commission has been doing over the past weeks and up until today with the SAFE instrument, so Security of Action for Europe, that was adopted today at COREPER and next week at Council level. So just to give you a bit an overview of what the Commission has been doing. So first, Commission has given the possibility to member states to spend more in defense through flexibility within the Stability and Growth Pact. So possibility is for member states to activate the national escape clause so that they can have 1.5% more of fiscal capacity for defense expenditures over the upcoming 4 years. That means that, you know, all extra defense expenditures will not be calculated as part of the deficit of those member states that will activate that clause. Today, we know that roughly we have 15 member states that have activated the clause. A group of member states said we will not because we can't afford, and other member states are contemplating the possibility of activating that clause. That money is for member states to spend the way they want. There are no conditions attached to that. They can invest in defense equipment, in research, in military stuff, whatever. It's their choice, their discretion. Second element is the Security Action for Europe. So here, Commission is willing to use the EU budget as a headroom to borrow 150 billion euros on the market to support common procurement as a rule. So member states can use that money to run common procurement as a rule. Possibility is still to go for national procurement. And that, so if you take the activation of the Stability and Growth Pacts together with this Security Action for Europe, that will create massive demand shock. So member states will have the means and capacity in the upcoming years to place massive contracts to their industry. And that's what I call the demand shock on one side. So what we are doing as well is to create the conditions for industry to be able to absorb that money. So we want to understand on the side of the demand, so on member state side, where they want to invest that money. What's the volume that they're expecting, so that we see and we understand as well whether our industry is able to absorb that and whether there are bottlenecks on the supply side and how we can address those bottlenecks. So you see, we're very much trying to balance the demand and the supply side. What matters here is, and especially when it comes to the financial sector, is predictability. So we want to kind of focus the efforts of member states towards certain capability priorities. We don't want member states to spend the money across the board. We want them to focus on where we have critical gaps. And that's why you have certain capability verticals, investment areas, that were outlined by the European Council in March, that are now codified within the Security Action for Europe instruments. So you have a list, a clear list of capability areas that member states need to focus on. So that's very important, and it's important as well for the financial ecosystem. What is important is coordination still, because, you know, with that massive investment on the side of member states, there is a risk that member states would still invest in a kind of uncoordinated manner, and that we refragment again defense market. So there is a need for Commission, for other institutions like the European Defence Agency, like the EDIS, to ensure that there is a minimum of coordination in terms of those investment plans. So this is what we will certainly be trying to support in the upcoming months. Now, one thing that matters is, again, we're trying to create the conditions for much more public investment, but we need as well to mobilize the financial ecosystem, so private investments. We started with the European Investment Bank. So here, major progress were made. The EIB changed its lending policy. It decided to narrow down its exclusion, some of the exclusion areas, which is very good news, and that would certainly enable the EIB to step up its effort in support of defense, especially when it comes to the industrial ramp-up. So SMEs or mid-caps willing to expand their industrial capacities will certainly have the possibility to rely much more on the EIB to do that. But EIB change of lending policy is very good as well because it has a spillover effect on commercial banks on one side, plus on the financial ecosystem as a whole. So private equities, venture capital funds, pension funds, and indeed we see lots of tractions over the past weeks, months. We see lots of traction and much more investors interested to invest in defense. We are working, for instance, very closely with the European Investment Funds to create an ecosystem of investors. And what the EIF is telling us is they have a very deep pipeline of investors in defense now. And that has happened over the last six months. So there is clearly now an interest on the side of investors to step in efforts in defense. Last message from me is that it is not something that is, it's not a small cycle. Here we're talking of cycle that will last at least 1 decade in terms of member states increasing their defense budgets, Commission stepping up its efforts, financial ecosystem as well. So it's a kind of cycle that will last at least 10 years. So, and I think this is the kind of predictability that the financial ecosystem needs to understand. So because of this geopolitical context, it is not like a one-off that will last a few years and then it's over. This is a long-lasting investment and a long-lasting effort that is ahead of us. So I think that's very important. So again, keyword here is predictability in terms of investment volume, in terms of where to invest, and in terms of time of deployment of that effort. With that, I'd be happy to take a few questions if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Guillaume. Indeed, Guillaume cannot stay for the second part of the meeting, so I think that we have some issue with the mic. He cannot stay for the second part of the meeting, so if you have any question, we can take a small round of questions and then we move to the panel. Anyone who would like to break the ice? Okay, I see here 3 people. Maybe we take these 3 questions.
Good afternoon. My name is Ayman. I'm working as a defense and raw materials analyst. I have one question. You said that basically regarding safe member states can spend whatever they want in defense, and they can spend the money they receive from safe wherever they want, be it innovation, industry, or in the army, etc. Does it also mean that they can spend it more on the upstream level, for example, in acquiring raw materials or in other industries strategic to the defense industry and not directly on the defense industry per se? Thank you.
We take 3.
Thank you. José González Mínguez with Banco de España and House of the Euro. So it seems to be of the essence to have some coordination mechanism among the different member states, no? In the kind of in what they are spending the money, no? Coming from whatever source. Do you think that we have now the appropriate mechanisms in place, or would we need to resort to some of the ideas that have been floated around, no? Like the European defense mechanism, so this new institution created as a result of an intergovernmental agreement, no? Also taking into account that the membership of the EU does not necessarily correspond to the states, to the countries that would be ready to participate in this common defense effort. One case in point is the UK, obviously.
And then I think there was.
Thank you. Helmut von Glasenapp, European Long-Term Investors Association, representing national promotional banks and institutions. My question is linked to the previous one. We hear from our members that in many cases the order books doesn't justify investment, at least today. What is your feedback regarding really concrete orders of whomever needs to place these orders? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the first question, it's not, I mean, SAFE, so the Security Action for Europe. Here, member states will have to focus on certain capability areas. So this is, I mean, where member states are free to spend the money they want. The way they want is when it comes to the use of the Stability and Growth Pacts and the National Escape Clause. For this one, indeed, so we're giving, I mean, we are giving additional fiscal capacity to member states for them to invest the way they want. So if they want to, to invest in raw materials, they are free to do so. So this is where you have this full freedom, if you want, in terms of what to invest, how to invest, including in terms of human resources. SAFE, you have a closed list of capability areas that is in the regulation. So you have the 7 capability verticals that were defined by the EU leaders on 6th of March, so European Council, and member states added a few. So, but that's a closed list. Then the question about coordination, indeed, so that's one of the key points. And actually, what will happen now is a bit of a race, because SAFE is adopted next week, and from that day, member states will have 6 months to elaborate what we call national defense investment plans. So meaning what member states want to procure with the help of SAFE and with whom, potentially. So that coordination moment has to happen during the 6 months. The risk of, like absence of coordination is really during that window of 6 months. So this is where we need to deploy some kind of agility and ingenuity in terms of how we can ensure a minimum of coordination between member states in terms of how they will develop their national plans. We cannot force anything, but we can support them in terms of matchmaking, in terms of talking together, in terms of exchanging information on what they want to procure with whom. So that's what we need to achieve. And here we have a very pragmatic way of approaching that. We can't just afford having a very scientific and rigorous way of working. We need to act right now. So this is a very pragmatic way of achieving this coordination, but it is necessary. The mechanism you referred to is slightly different. I mean, this idea was slightly different, and we don't see, I mean, basically what happens is really short term. So we need actions right now when it comes to coordination. Just on the UK, you mentioned UK. Just to let you know that, first, SAFE, for the first time ever, we have an instrument, a defense-related instrument, that has an open architecture. So it's possible for third countries, providing certain conditions are met, to be associated to SAFE. Good news is that now with the UK, we had the EU-UK summit, that we have an agreement with the UK on what we call the Security and Defense Partnership, which means that the UK can be associated to common procurements. Next step for them is for their industry to be eligible in a SAFE, for certain SAFE contracts, we would need as well on top of that bilateral agreements. But there is a clear intention, be it on the side of the UK or on the side of our member states, to negotiate swiftly such a bilateral agreement. So we will have to see, because we need to define terms and conditions, but there is a clear policy intent on the two sides. And then the third question, which was related to this one, it was about
The orders.
the orders, exactly. So indeed, so for us, the key is that member states would place orders very quickly. Because SAFE, the intention is, the policy intention is, delivery of equipment by end of 2030. Again, background is European Defence Readiness 2030, so we need to rearm Europe and get equipment by end 2030. So what we want to see is orders placed on the market very quickly. So that's what we need to get. That will certainly help. I mean, tier one, the big players, the main contractors, but what we expect as well is that the supply chains would rapidly benefit from those contracts. SAFE has a certain pre-financing rate, so we expect that part of that pre-financing will go further. I mean, it would cascade down into the supply chain, so that we don't have any issue of bottlenecks, because sometimes the bottlenecks are at the level of the suppliers, so sub-suppliers like SMEs that do not have the capacity to expand their industrial ramp-up because of lack of access to finance. So we expect that those contracts can be placed quickly, including because then it will enable the supply chain to get access to finance with commercial banks or with investors. If any other questions?
Is there, Daniel, the last one, and then we open the floor for...
Sorry, Daniel Gross, long time, SEPS, now Bocconi. Two short questions maybe, one more technical, one more political. The technical question is, as far as I understand, SAFE does not require that the plant investment or plant procurement is additional. So you could have member states that do not increase their defense spending at all, but still get financing from SAFE, maybe even from existing projects where they have some common procurement plans. Just tell me whether I'm correct there. And the second point goes beyond what you have decided now, you or the Commission and so on. Since the treaty doesn't allow the budget to be spent on military materiel, I believe it's Article 42, are there any plans or thoughts how one could either circumvent that or find new ways to mobilize the EU budget directly for defense expenditure?
So when it comes to your first question, just to be clear, SAFE cannot substitute, so I mean, SAFE can, okay, so member states can use loans for existing contracts or existing framework contracts, right? But what we want to see is that they use SAFE for additional equipment. So if you have an existing contract, you can use SAFE, you can pump money from SAFE into that, but it needs to lead to additional equipment compared to what you had initially planned, right? So it's not a substitute. We need to see, again, you need to see in the contract that you have new money and that will lead to new delivery by 2030. Now, when it comes to your second question, I think so far the Commission has very much within boundaries of the treaty and within, you may have different interpretation in terms of how you interpret the treaty. I think what matters is the outputs. So far the Commission has managed each time to put instruments that meets the targets. And so far, so good. So with SAFE, we enable member states to go for common procurements, but also because it has an impact on the industry, a positive impact on the industry, and because we need to achieve rapid industrial ramp-up. So far, so good, I'd say. And as long as we have this creativity that enables us to cope with the different situations, I think that's all fine. We don't want to kind of waste too much time into dogmatic debates. I think we have a legal service that is highly creative. So far, so good.
Thank you very much. I think we can close this first part here and then we move to the panel. Many thanks for updating us on all this evolving landscape and also for taking the questions. Thank you very much. And I would like now to invite the panelists to join me on stage. I would like to ask Sophie Barbier. She's the director at European Affairs Department of Caisse des Dépôts and Consignation. Very welcome, Sophie. And then Davide Cucino is Senior Vice President European Affairs at Fincantieri. Fincantieri, for those who know, is one of the world's largest shipbuilding. And then Daniel Gross, Director of the Institute for European Policy Making at Bocconi, former SEPS Director and still member of our board. And then last but not least, I would like to ask Oliver Cushworth, is Senior Policy Officer at the European Investment Bank Security and Defence Office. So welcome all, and many thanks for accepting to come tonight. We have heard the very good introduction. I think it was a very good way to set the scene, and I'm sure that there will be different views about how to move forward when it comes to financing EU defense. So as I said, as anticipated earlier, the purpose is really to try to see how different actors are thinking about how to finance EU defense. But to start with, actually, I would like to ask Daniel to follow up a bit on what Guillaume just said, and about the fiscal space that national member states have to finance defense, and the extent to which we can expect, for instance, the escape clause to be taken, and what it means. But if you allow me, maybe also a preamble. Maybe it's good to say a few words about what defense expenditure actually is, because we all speak about defense, and it's somehow it's often very abstract. Daniel.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here. And when I left SEPS, we didn't do anything about defense, and now it is the key issue. So let me start with your last question or remark. People perhaps let's say a couple of years ago, total EU defense spending, or spending by EU members, was around 250 billion euros per annum, and of which only 50 billion was for equipment. So keep that in mind when you hear these big figures. The existing spending is 70, 80, depending exactly, perhaps you can give even more precise figures, on personnel and other stuff. Now comes the important qualifier, that as members countries ramp up spending, they can't actually find enough soldiers to pay for. And what they have discovered is that they don't have enough artillery, they don't have enough airplanes, not tanks, right? So for the time being, the increment in defense spending is to a very large extent actually on equipment. Right? So, and now let's come to the figures that you mentioned. If you think about 800 billion more for defense, now the poor Commission, if I can say, they're well-meaning, but I think the headline figures they have put out are not realistic. The 800 billion figure was under the assumption all member countries do 1.5% more for 4 years, 6% of our GDP, approximately 800 billion. But the truth is, you already mentioned, 14 or 15 member states have actually indicated a willingness to spend more. They account for about 45%, let's say a little bit less than 1.5%, 1/2 of EU GDP. So you can roughly cut the 800 billion figure 1/2. Plus, of course, even Germany cannot spend everything immediately, so probably even a bit less. The countries that have asked for the national exception clause to be able to spend more have an average GDP, debt to GDP ratio of 60%. The countries that have not asked for it have an average debt to GDP ratio of 90%. And I think here you see the difference. For them, it's not so much a question of the Commission allowing them to spend more, it's a question of fiscal space because the debt level is just too high. On top of that, one at least, has already also a deficit which is so large that the debt level is not under control. So I think one has to keep that in mind. So well-meaning, but I think the expectation should be much lower. On the 150 billion, as my question, or the answer to the question is already showed, I suspect a large part of it will go to existing projects, which will be a bit revamped, and also who is interested in actually taking them? Only the countries that have a higher refinancing cost than the Commission or the EU. And that's essentially Poland, Italy, and Spain. Right? So again, and it's only for a very limited number, if you take them seriously, for drones, artillery munitions, and so on. And so I don't think that is something on which you can have even 100 billion spent in a couple of years. So let me conclude by saying this is what they could do as a Commission, since they don't have any money of their own. But in the end, it depends on member countries. And then the incentive to use the Commission funding is very much limited to Poland, which will actually increase spending, but other countries which have indicated that they will not. So I think that's the if you want, the macro background to this discussion.
Thanks, Daniel. Indeed, the idea was really to have a bit of the macro picture. I would like now to move to the more micro perspective. And I would like to ask Davide, I mean, you represent the industry. I mean, Fincantieri is not only the defense, it's part of the defense industry, but it also produces civil ships. But you have a lot of experience, and I think one of the questions I would like to ask is what are the most pressing needs when it comes to financing, maybe from your perspective, but also your knowledge of the value chains of the sectors, and where you see specific gaps?
Thank you for the question. If you allow me, I wanted to spend 1 minute on taking taking advantage of the intervention of Daniel, because it's true that probably from one perspective we see some limits in terms of countries or in terms of choices as far as safe and the 650 million that are foreseen by the Commission. But on the other side, I think that this may represent also an opportunity, because the aggregation of demand should give also and should provide also to the sector enough credibility, and this credibility could, in a way or in another, make the private sector, the private financial sector, increase the interest in investing in the defense sector. On the top of that, I think that we don't have to forget, and I think that Guillaume also mentioned, that this could trigger also companies that are so far positioned more in the civilian sector or in dual use sector. So I think that in a way or another, this package should help to raise the interest and the appetite for the financial market. Having said that, being a representative of industry, the first thing that we need is to have a clear priorities. And to have clear priorities, we need to understand very much what are the capability gaps. Guillaume mentioned that in the white paper there are 7 big capability gaps identified. I would add that in the discussion of the Council in the last couple of weeks, those capability gaps have probably increased, especially because the maritime sector was a little bit unsatisfied with this list. But again, once you have defined the capability gaps, then the nations, the member states, have to identify what are the real projects, the real programs that they want to realize and to set. The second one was also mentioned is orders. It was quite easy, I think, to focus on orders when we had to increase the number of production of ammunitions or to increase the stockpile, because it is a clear identified product. But if you consider segments and sectors, for example, like ours, the shipbuilding, but not only the shipbuilding, I think also the aviation, you have to keep in mind that the life cycle is much larger. You cannot talk about the production of scale or ready to manufacture. So the requirement is a longer, larger lead times, and in this respect, you need to reprioritize because otherwise you may enter into financial losses. Beside the orders, it is very important also to mention the time, the speed. And again, if you consider segment and sectors like the shipbuilding, you need, of course, to focus on a longer period of time. On funds, I don't remember who, maybe Guillaume was talking about trying to trigger also the venture capital. But we have to face the reality. If you look into the NATO area, for example, into 2024, 80% of the investment of venture capital were coming from the United States. Another 20% was shared between UK and the European Union. And if I have to consider European Union, probably we have to consider only a couple of large countries really dedicated to this. It's true that EIB, with this new mandate, has the possibility probably to enlarge the availability of funds. But it's also true that so far I think that it would be possible for small and medium enterprise and prime, which are much more dedicated to defense per se, would probably have more difficulties in taking those tools. I would stop here for the moment, maybe.
Thanks very much for really highlighting some very concrete issues which are related to the private sector. Now, I would like to move to a different perspective. So Daniel basically told us that when it comes to fiscal resources at the national level, these are quite constrained and maybe much less than expected. We don't know yet how much can come from the EU level. What we can take as new money from the budget is still unclear. So in this landscape, I think the role of national promotional banks and the EIB comes to the stage. And I think that there is quite a lot of room for it. And this is why I would like to ask Sophie. CDC is one of those national promotional banks who actually were already active in defense. Not all could or can invest in defense. I would like to ask you, first of all, how the situation has changed since 2022 and now with this all change of priorities in the way you act and you define your own priorities.
Yeah. Thank you for this question. Indeed, CDC, as a national promotional institution, traditionally supports public policies and finances the French economy. And our priorities are the financing of the green transition, the promoting also social and territorial cohesion, and also enhancing sovereignties. And in this respect, for us, defense is part of our investment strategy as any other sector. So you are right. Before 2022, we were already active in the defense sector. And at the same time, there was a change. We cannot deny that with the war in Ukraine. And then for CDC defense financing, we decided due to this new geopolitical context, to adapt a more structured and explicit approach to defense. And maybe I can provide you with concrete examples of what it means. This approach has materialized first with the adoption of a public doctrine that clearly outlines our commitment to this area, and in a positive manner, not saying that we exclude this or this. It's really a positive approach, and in this regard, we really have drawn inspiration from the example of GDP, which did it before 1 or 2 years before us. In parallel, we have also revised our exclusion policies to align, in fact, these policies with the position of the French authorities, and we have worked within our group, because CDC is a big group, there is a holding and there are a lot of entities, to ensure that this alignment is really respected in every entity. And as a consequence, now I can say that we can finance everything except, of course, activities linked to weapons that are prohibited by international conventions signed and ratified by France. So it's very broad. On a more operational level, we have also decided to have a clear picture of what we were already doing. And so we try to assess our commitments in this field. And it is currently estimated at about 50 billion euros. And we have also identified the products, the financial products we are able to provide to the sector. We have also, in response to market demands, increased our commitments over the last months, and in particular concerning the support for exports, but also in investing in defense funds, because there are more and more specialized defense funds coming to us on the French market, at least. So there is really a need for our investment in private equity, venture capital funds today. And we have also developed real new products, and I can, for instance, give the example of Bpifrance, which has just launched a retail product specialized on defense. So all these changes were made public in France during a conference organized by the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Defense. And it is important to mention this because indeed, and I think it was already said, it is important to fuel the dynamic, the place with the other financial institutions, to make it possible for the sector to get financing other than only budgetary.
Thanks very much, Sophie, for this example and illustrating how things are actually evolving quite fast in terms also of offer of financial products. I would like now to move to the EIB, and it was mentioned also by Guillaume. The fact that defense and security has become an EU priority has also shifted an impact on the EIB and shifted also its strategic orientation and also some lending operation, I understand. Can you guide us a bit through these new changes?
Thank you. Yes, indeed, the EIB has been mentioned 2 or 3 times already today, and quite positively, which is a nice change actually, because often in these defense events we're a little bit of heat on us because we haven't financed defense traditionally. We still don't finance weapons and ammunition. Up until March this year, we could only do dual use. And I think before 2022, we never did more than 1 billion euros per year for the defense sector. So classically, not an actor in this space, but I mean, we're a big institution. We finance 100 billion euros into the European economy and global economy. So it's not so nimble. It doesn't change overnight, but change is happening. And as you say, I think when an institution like EIB starts to change, it will be impactful because we already have a lot of client relationships. Most of the large European defense companies are existing clients of the EIB. So Thales, Leonardo, Airbus, Rheinmetall, even they've all taken EIB financing, but just for their civilian or dual use programs. So what we're trying to do now is to build on those relationships to also finance their military and defense programs. And it's quite hard to do. Where we've spent the last 10 years becoming the climate bank, and our systems have not been set up to support the defense sector. So we didn't have the capacity to handle confidential information, data security. Of course, we could handle business confidential, but not military confidential, which is a different. It's a different level. We're having to get security clearances for colleagues working with these clients, working with the defense ministries, and it's all taking some time. But the good news is that we think we will more than double, maybe even triple, our support for the defense sector over last year. We're looking currently at 22 large, what could be called flagship projects, many of them with either fully military or large military components. This time last year, I think it was 3 projects that we were looking at. So that's quite a ramp up. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot of information gaps that we have to close. But we're working with Commission, with DG DEFIS, with European Defence Agency, with NATO, to try and onboard the expertise that we haven't got to help us do that. But I would also put the ball back into the court of the member states and say that defence ministries are not always used to taking financial instruments. They're not always used to reimbursable finance. So we have to help them work with their own finance ministries to consider new ideas, such as framework loans, such as instruments that have different forms of commercialization, instruments that have maybe different time lengths than they used to, and I think that's something which is happening. But just to complete the point, we are the EU bank, so our shareholders are the finance ministers of the EU, and we remain responsive to the external situation, to feedback from industry and the other institutions on how we support them and their different programs for ReArming Europe.
Thanks very much for sharing this recent change. Maybe a follow-up question. What do you expect for the next 12 months in terms of what kind of change do you anticipate?
Well, politically, the big events, of course, are the NATO summit in June, the EU Council the same month, and then member states will have to decide the volume of their defence spending targets, and then industry will have to respond to that. And I think that there will be secondary and tertiary impacts of those decisions, and not least that of the supply chains, the defense tech, and the role of investors. Because if you can imagine that member states go to 3-4%, a lot of that will go to the national champions, the primes, but then that will require a scaling up of all the SMEs and mid caps that work with those larger companies. And I don't think that the financing capacity is there to do that. So For example, where we are, with the European Investment Fund, our subsidiary, is looking at accelerating to a great extent what it can do on a pan-European fund for going beyond private equity, going into venture capital, and trying to build that ecosystem of financing that the large defense companies will need in order to scale up with some of the defense target figures that are being talked about. And I think for us, it's just going to be about well, continuing to build the expertise in-house on defense, and continuing to see where the gaps are and where the additionality of EIB is, because there are these other instruments, there's SAFE, there's increased member state spending, large defense companies are well capitalized themselves, so it's not so obvious for EIB just to go into the market and spend 4 or 5 billion. You know, we have to do it in a smart way that doesn't crowd out other more appropriate actors.
Thank you very much. Maybe building on this, I would like to go back to Sophie, because I guess for the EIB, but also for national promotional banks, and institutions, one question is how to turn what is defense expenditure into investment. No, this is the purpose of the institution. How are you looking at this issue?
Yes, indeed. The question of this roundtable is how to finance the future of EU defense, and I think that we are mixing up a little bit two related but different things. The concept of military budget and the concept of investment as such. In a way, there are two questions. The first concerns really public spending, and it is how can member states finance an increase in the military budget in a context of, we all know that, really already constrained public finances. And this answer involves mechanisms that DG DEFIS described at the beginning of this roundtable, and which are proposed in the ReArm Europe Plan. Of course, long-term investors can, in some cases, play a role in these mechanisms, and this is, for instance, the case of our Polish colleagues from BGK. BGK in Poland manages a fund which is enabling the financing of Polish public defense programs through an ad hoc issuance program. So that's the first question. But in a way, increasing public budgets, it's part of the solution, but does not solve all problems. And in a way, it does not solve the big issue arising from the limited production capacities in Europe and the lack of strategic autonomy. In a way, that's why I think the second question, the question you ask me now, is also important because it concerns the financing of the European defense sector. An increase in public defense spending does not necessarily lead to more European sovereignty in defense. On the contrary, if it results in an increase in imports, then it will entail less sovereignty. So this second question is important because it is focused on how the rise in public defense spending translates into increased investments in the sector in Europe. And I think that it is where long-term investors, so including EIB of course, but with national promotional institutions also, can help address. In a way, it has already been mentioned, but while an increase in military budgets may lead to a rise in the order books of big companies, the increase takes time to materialize. and primarily concerns the major contractors and their tier one subcontractors, but not many of the SMEs of the sector, which are further down the supply chain. So this is, in fact, the issue. How can you finance these SMEs? But there are also other issues. So very short-term financing, long-term financing for SMEs, financing of necessary infrastructure. All these topics are important if we want to build the future of EU defense. And there I think that and PBIs have a key role to play in this, in bridging these long-term in financing needs, and also, of course, in attracting private financiers. In this respect, maybe we are participating in a shift in the financing model of the sector from an exclusively public budget dependent model to a more balanced public-private financing model. And it is necessary considering the needs, the investment needs we are today facing. And in this respect, I think that pan-European initiatives are welcome. Of course, we have the European Bank here at this table, but it is also possible to envisage cooperation between NPBIs that are active in the sector, together with EIB, of course, to try to finance the needs, and maybe more important, to send a signal to the market. We, long-term investors, acting in support of public policies, we are investing in this sector, so you, private financiers, you can do the same and come along with us. So that, I think that is maybe the important part, to try to, as you say, turn this increasing military budget into more long-term investments in the sector in Europe.
Thanks.
Can I act on this, please? A couple of days ago, I was sitting around the table with some defense stakeholders, including small and medium enterprise. And among those small and medium enterprises, there were some that are relevant for the innovation segment. And they were, let me use the word complaining, about the administrative burden for getting finance. They say that we prefer to do our own in-house research and development and spend our money than to wait 1-2 years until we get the money to fund our research and development. And this is probably very relevant with the speed that we are all talking about in this specific moment. There's the need of speed to ramp up. There is the speed to get orders and to deliver the orders, but also there is the speed to, if you want to create really an European technology defense industrial base, we really need to have the speed also in getting enough fund at reasonable way in order to get those small and medium enterprise, those innovation company really to boost and to raise. So that's probably one of the issue.
Maybe building on exactly on this point, I mean, we are of course speaking about financing, but Guillaume mentioned also the fragmentation, risk of fragmentation of procurement. So maybe from the industry perspective, to what extent these are important issues? So it's only about the money, or there are also other issues?
We have a point of view on fragmentation. It's true that there are too many programs, but we are also, especially in the naval sector, trying among the various stakeholders to work on interoperability and interchangeability. The fact to have many programs is not always a bad thing, because if you don't have enough companies that try to do new products, to make innovation, to make competition, you really don't increase also the level of technology. So there are many ways to work together. One is common programs, and there are a number of good examples, not only when the European Defence Fund has set, but before. There are bilateral programs between Italy and France, between Belgium and the Netherlands, and those are successful. There are other examples which are more relevant to the setup of joint venture or joint procurement. There are also merger acquisitions. So there is a number of different ways to work on programs and to make the technology scale up.
Thank you. I would like to close the panel with Daniel and then open the floor for questions. So we started with macro, and I would like to close with macro. So, I mean, we are trying to find resources. We want that the businesses actually to produce more. Do you expect the macroeconomic impact from this stimulus from defense and maybe a way to save the manufacturing sector in Europe?
There will certainly be a positive impact, but as I outlined earlier, it's actually quite limited. Let's take the 300 billion over several years increase. Let's assume even 1/2 of it is equipment, right? 150 over 4 to 5 years, 50 billion. It's nice to have, right? But it's less than 1/2 or whatever percent of the EU GDP. So it's small. It has the advantage that it comes at a time when our manufacturing sector, like especially automotive, is downsizing to some extent at least. And we already have seen stories about people being shifted from one to the other. So it certainly helps at the margin, but this is not what will make the EU suddenly going much stronger. If you allow me, I wanted to add one point on the nexus between the military spending and innovation. We did a study last year on let's say the European industry and its specialization in middle technologies, and that specialization has persisted for 20 years, so that's why we call it the middle tech trap. But we also looked in particular at the aerospace and defense sector. And my expectation was here we will find a high-tech sector. Actually, what we found is that on average, the aerospace and defense sector is less research and development intensive than automotive. Okay. So that's just a fact, right? And if you think about it for a while, right, you have these tanks which have to be produced, you have the artillery shells, and you have the ships. They have a shelf life, hopefully, of 50 years, whatever, 20 years, right? That's not where a lot of new technology goes in there. Of course, we have now the drones, which are extremely important, but they're extremely small market. So what I'm concerned about is that a very large share of that military expenditure will be captured by this more mundane mid-tech stuff, right, or even low-tech stuff. And that there will not be enough space for the innovators, which might be small, but the ones who could drive technology innovation. And what the people in the area tell me, it's not a question of financing, it's a question of the attitudes of the finance ministries, right? These guys are not certified. They don't have every one of their employees with a security check, right? They don't have secure rooms. And I think besides the financing, which now the other people on the panel here are mobilizing, I think we really need a new attitude by the defense ministries, by their procurement agencies, to be much more open towards these new ideas, these technology-driven ideas, which I think will make or break the efficiency of the vast amounts of money we're going to spend. So I think it's very important, not so much how much we spend, but how we spend it. And that's where my big question mark is.
Okay, let's open the floor for questions. So there is a gentleman there and another one. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Diego Ojeda, and full disclosure, I work for the European Commission on defense. Let me start by, I would like to come back to what you were saying in the second intervention more than in the first one. But let me come back, let me try to be conciliatory. I couldn't agree more with you that what we need is a new approach in the ministries of defense, not as regards innovation, as regards everything. And one of the important things that we're going to, or at least potentially important things that we're going to try to do is by mid-June, we're going to come up with this omnibus simplification for defense. That's going to try to strike the right balance, because many of the obstacles are there for a reason, but while preserving the goal, try to improve the results, including speed of procurement. Now, that's in as much as I agree with you, and yes, I believe that criticism and skepticism are not only legitimate but also healthy. Having said that, innovation is not to be tackled by SAFE. We have EDIP. EDIP will be adopted hopefully in a few weeks, certainly by summer, and next year we'll have more money than it has now. And yes, there are ways and means and the political will to promote innovation a lot more than we have to so far. There's the European Defence Fund. That will remain for research and development. SAFE is there for one specific issue, which is to promote joint procurement and joint development to some extent. But that doesn't mean that the other items are not in. And yes, I agree with you that SAFE is not going to be the magic wand, is not going to be the panacea. But let's remember one thing. Defense is and will remain primarily a national competence. So the responsibility to achieve readiness in the EU is on the 27 member states, and 23 of which are agreeing to very ambitious targets in NATO, for which, first, they will have to spend better, obviously, but or second, they will have to spend better, and on a number of capabilities that we're missing, and on which they agree that they're vital, and they will have to spend a lot more. So SAFE and the white paper and the national escape clause just try to supplement and improve or facilitate them doing their homework. But by no means the responsibility of achieving NATO targets can be laid on Brussels or the EU or the Commission itself. It's just a comment. But for the same token, the EIB. The EIB can do a lot and it can accompany, and the Commission can, and the EU budget. But at the end of the day, it is the responsibility of the finance ministers and of the budgets of those prime ministers that will attend the NATO summit and will agree to move from 2% to a higher figure to comply with that target.
Thank you. There is another question here. Anyone else in the meantime?
Hello, hello, I'm Simone from the European Commission. I have a question for Daniel, mostly on, I very much agree.
Can you speak up a little bit?
Okay, should be on. Pardon. Now, on the macroeconomic impact, I was most interested, and specifically on the fiscal multiplier of defense expenditure, which is a key topic here. Clearly, I very much agree, depends on the subsectors to which the funds are allocated, on the import intensity of the expenditure. This is key, obviously. And then also on the long-term impact it could have on productivity and thereby potential growth via TFP, considering these are very capital-intensive say investment. And related to that, to what extent these factors could be maximized, whether according to which the funds are allocated in mostly large member states with large defense industries like Italy, France, Germany, already big industry at play, whereas other like Spain and others don't have this big industry with such big capability, but only have some niche. They can produce some parts, say, of equipment or so on. So to what extent creating some, say, genuine European supply chain in this way whereby the parts, some part of components of equipment, instead of being imported, are created, are produced in some member states and then assembled, such as a genuine, say, a project with high common European interest, as they're labeled now under the RRF. Thanks a lot.
There is another question at the bottom. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Alessandro. I come from European University Institute from Florence. So I would like to connect 2 points that Sophie and Davide said before. You guys said something like it's important to spend, but it's also important to spend well. Now, like, for example, EU countries build something like 14 different types of tanks, different types of vehicles, ammunitions for different systems. And so it looks like that ReArm Europe is more like an urgent and bad spending system instead of a coordinated one. Because we risk to spend more, but we risk to produce less compared to Russia, which is outproducing us right now. And Sophie said that we have to spend, but not importing too much because it doesn't translate to sovereignty. Now my question is, the sovereignty has to be owned by who? Like by France, by Germany, by Poland, by EU? But EU is not an entity, so who has to own their sovereignty? Thank you.
Maybe we stop here. Daniel, there were some questions for you, and I don't know if anyone else wants to react.
Thank you. Alors, I will answer to your question, but first I wanted to react also to the other intervention concerning EDIP, and I think it's linked, in fact, because in a way, defense is indeed a national policy. And despite the fact that we all think that it is necessary to coordinate more, it will remain basically a national competence. But I am not a politician, I am I belong to a financial institution. And I think that through the financing, we can also contribute to the closer cooperation and maybe to a convergence in terms of value chain or supply chain. So, and that's why I was interested by the mention you did concerning EDIP, because in EDIP there is an interesting instrument that is not very well known, I think, but which is called FAST. And FAST is a fund dedicated to the financing of the supply chain. And I agree with my colleagues, innovation is important, but the supply chain and the scale-up of SMEs is also important, because we are talking of industrial capacity, not only of innovation in our case. And so FAST is interesting because it's, technically speaking, from a budgetary point of view, it's a top-up of InvestEU. And as a top-up of InvestEU, it means that it is an instrument which relies on the implication of EIB, of course, but also of national institutions. And here, in terms of defense, it is more important even than in other sectors, because it's not only a question of joining our forces, financial forces. It's also a question of joining our legitimacy. Because once again, I come back to the question at the back. Sovereignty, it's European sovereignty in total, but in a way, sovereignty is still and will remain for long a national concept as well. And so, once again, a way to reconcile a European approach, a kind of cooperation, coordination, and also a national approach that you cannot skip in this sector. It's to do it like that, to have this kind of instrument combining a European umbrella, so priorities, European priorities, with an operational national position with this open architecture. So I think it's really important. It's a way to deal with this ambivalence of the topic.
Can I add something? Yes, fragmentation, yes, there is fragmentation, but on the other side, I think that in the last few years, we were able also to work on common project, and that's what European Defence Fund is all about. There are a number of flagships that has for the first time obliged different nations to work together on common projects. One of those Fincantieri is implementing is the European patrol corvette, together with France, together with Spain, and with other countries that on a second phase has also agreed to be part of. So I think there is a trend. On the other side, you cannot avoid to make different nations have different expectations, because they also have different requirements of operations. There are countries that produce the corvette because they want to use it on their own waters. There are countries that they have in mind working, for example, in the Indo-Pacific. So you cannot have, you may have different requirements, but it doesn't mean that you have fragmentation. Then, as I said, a little bit of fragmentation is fine, because a little bit of fragmentation means also that you have different minds working on different technologies, and this makes the technology, improve.
Thank you. Daniel, do you want to reply to on the multiplier maybe, or anything else that you want to say?
First, I wanted to agree on the fragmentation. I think the benefits of unified standard, especially if it's imposed from above, is very questionable for me. And I will come in a minute to who could unify. I think at the stage that we are right now, many of the military expenditure will be what's called shovel-ready projects, right? It's not everything is there, but it's much more shovel-ready than building a new motorway, right, where you start and have years. Because by now, even if late, capacities of our defense contractors have increased, right? By the way, Rheinmetall, for example, has more employees outside Germany than in Germany. So that speaks to some integration that is going on. But let me come to let's say, the question of efficiency of spending. And I think the factor that will lead, I hope at least, will be allowed to lead to a much higher efficiency of expenditure is basically Ukraine. A substantial part of the increase, what we call military expenditure, will actually be money going to Ukraine and then coming back, or vice versa, the Ukrainians telling the Germans and others what they need. And the Ukrainians, they cannot allow, they wouldn't survive with a heavy bureaucracy. They know what works, right? They have the experience now, and they will order what works. And I think and it's very good, by the way, that the Commission has put Ukraine in the ReArm entire setup, and the 150 billion SAFE instrument. And that is, I think, where if our defense ministries could wake up to the fact that not everywhere, but in many areas of actual warfare, land, air, and so on, the Ukrainians know what works and what is needed, and they're also at the forefront of development. If we can cooperate with them, I think our industry might come actually quite competitive, and the spending might actually be effective.
Oliver, last word for you.
Thank you. Just a final thought from the bank financing side. So in the white paper on the future of European defence, it talks about the importance of private financing as well, and something which we're very cognizant at EIB is how important a capital market, an improved capital market union would be for that. I mean, the gap for defence financing would be best closed if companies could go for financing solutions from a wider pool of investors than they currently have access to. So just it would be illustrative to think of a defense company in the Netherlands that can't get financing from its local bank because of ESG or maybe an information gap with regarding defense from that bank. But if it could go then to a bank in another member state, which is more experienced in financing defense companies similar to that one, then you're already having a solution. So I think whenever we talk about defense financing, Capital Markets Union is never far away from the table.
Capital Markets Union comes back. I think this is to be continued. In fact, this will be the first of many events on defense. But now I would like to hand over to Martina from Cassa Depositi and Prestiti to just wrap up and then we close.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming, all of you. I must say, not my favorite topic, but this is what we need to face. So thank you to all the speakers. Thank you, Cinzia, for organizing very insightful discussion. So it's clear that we have a huge challenge to face in terms of magnitude. We're talking about up to 800 billion by 2030, so huge numbers. Multi-faced issues that require strong coordination also between the national and the European levels. And this is, by the way, also we're trying to do as national promotional banks, because under the control of Sophie, who in fact leads us in this, we're trying to also get organized in a coordination mechanism and hopefully support also some co-financing initiatives. And this is what we do among various national promotional banks under the healthy umbrella. As Professor Gross rightly pointed out, this gap cannot be filled in only by SAFE. And in fact, private capital and attraction of private capital, which is typical of also the role that national promotional banks can play, is fundamental. And in coordination also with the EIB, this is precisely what we're trying to do. So Davide, thank you for highlighting the issue that it's not just a matter of finance, but also of need for long-term contracts, for coordinated procurement, as well as the capacity to invest in cutting-edge technologies like also, cybersecurity, robotics, and all that is needed to see this market supported not just by the financing part of it. And in fact, the key role that supply chains play. And again, in this respect, EDIP and FAST may end up helping us, because in fact, FAST could enhance the firepower of InvestEU, and we advocate for open access to all implementing partners under InvestEU scheme, also to support supply chains that work for the security and defense industry. So once again, to be continued, as Cinzia said, thank you very much for organizing. And now we have the cocktail downstairs in the green room as comme d'habitude. S'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much.